Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this webcast, Supporting Women in Midlife, Survey Insights on Workplace Practices and Employee Benefits, sponsored by AIMED Alliance. This webcast has been pre-approved for HRCI and SHRM credit. Please be sure to attend the complete webcast in order to receive your credits. If you have any questions during the webcast, click on the Q&A tab in your webinar controls and type them there. A new tab will open in your browser with the webcast survey. Please be sure to complete it as soon as the webcast is ended. It is now my pleasure to turn it over to AIMED Alliance for their presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today for this webinar on supporting women in midlife. My name is Olivia Backus, and I'm a staff attorney with AIMED Alliance. For those of you who aren't familiar with the organization, we are a nonprofit health policy organization whose mission is to protect and enhance the rights of healthcare consumers and providers. We're thrilled to have you join us today as we dive into new insights on our recent survey on menopause in the workplace. The session is designed to help employers and HR professionals understand the specific challenges women face during these pivotal life stages and how organizations can better support them. For today, we have four major goals. First, we'll be examining key insights gathered from our recent survey that provide a deeper understanding on how employees perceive menopause-related symptoms and their impact on the workplace. Next, we'll assess the impact of menopause on women's professional lives, including how these symptoms can hinder productivity, limit career progression, and reduce workplace satisfaction for many women in midlife. Then we'll explore perspectives on age-related health benefits and how these shape healthcare decisions. And lastly, we'll identify gaps in current workplace support and discuss strategies employers can implement to better support aging employees. We'll begin by exploring key findings from our recent survey and invite our panelists to share their insights, helping us gain a deeper understanding of these results. Towards the end, we'll open the floor for Q&A, and we encourage you to submit questions in the chat so that we can address these at the end. Before we get started, I'd like to turn it over to the panelists to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Claire Gill. I'm the founder and president of the National Menopause Foundation. I'm delighted to be here, and I look forward to talking with all of you about your questions about menopause in the workplace.
Hello, I'm Irene Anigne, the Chief Science Officer for the Society for Women's Health Research. At SWHR, we advance women's health through science, policy, and education, and really excited to talk about the work that is being done. So much work needed to be done in menopause, especially in the workplace.
Hello. I'm Dr. Joyelle, the menopause mogul. I'm a board-certified OBGYN and currently in perimenopause also. Just so excited to be here to share my own journey as well as answer all of your questions moving forward and just amplifying this conversation. And thanks for having me.
Thank you all for being here and sharing your time with us. Before we dive into today's discussion, I'd like to take a moment to provide a background on our survey. The goal was to understand perceptions of aging, particularly when it comes to women in midlife, and to examine how employers are supporting them. We wanted to assess whether current health benefits and accommodations are meeting the needs of women in midlife and identify where there are gaps in support. The survey was distributed to HR professionals, and we received a little over 300 responses. And before we dive into today's discussion, let's take a moment just to define some key terms that will provide some important background for our conversation. When we say women in midlife, this term generally refers to women between the ages of 40 and 60, a phase that often encompasses a variety of physical, emotional, and life stage changes. And although the term menopause is commonly used to refer to the entire frame of midlife changes, there are different stages to menopause. Perimenopause is the transition leading up to menopause. It's marked by a natural decline in reproductive hormones, resulting in the end of a woman's menstrual cycle. It most commonly starts in women's mid to late 40s and typically lasts about 4 to 8 years. Menopause is defined as the end of a woman's menstrual cycle, which is confirmed when she has gone 12 months without a period. This marks the end of the reproductive phase. The average age for menopause is around 51, with the majority of women experiencing it between the ages of 49 and 52. Finally, postmenopause refers to the stage of life that follows once menopause is completed. And together, these stages form an important part of the broader changes experienced during midlife that we'll explore today. So let's kick it off by examining how employers perceive menopause-related symptoms in the workplace. The survey found that over 80% of respondents acknowledge that menopause symptoms impact women's careers. So to begin, I'd like to first ask Dr. Joelle Ballard to describe the common menopause-related symptoms and what impact these symptoms have on women's day-to-day lives.
So there are over 34 symptoms of menopause or perimenopause. And some of the common ones that can certainly impact women in their workplace. I'm going to start off kind of sectioning off into physical symptoms. Most commonly are vasomotor symptoms, which are hot flashes and night sweats. And essentially with those, they can be very distracting from women's work. They can be embarrassing and just uncomfortable. There is sleep disturbances, and that can be difficulty sleeping because of night sweats or just insomnia. And because of that, that can lead to chronic fatigue, which essentially can lead to reduced energy. So that's less productivity when they're going to work. They're going to work already feeling tired. So that can be an issue. Another symptom can be joint pains, where they just physically don't feel well and they're having pain and it prevents them from doing physical tasks at work, or prolonged sitting at work can make them even more uncomfortable. Another physical symptom, vaginal dryness, which some people are like, well, vaginal dryness can actually affect someone's work. Of course it can, because of that discomfort. It can be very distracting. Women can lose focus because they're, feeling this discomfort down below. So certainly that can be an issue as far as physical symptoms. Cognitive symptoms, we're talking about brain fog and memory lapses. So when we have this brain fog and memory lapses, we are not able to concentrate. We have problems with paying attention to a lot of details. Multitasking can be very challenging. Recalling information can be very challenging. And all this can impact how we're showing up in our workplaces. Emotional symptoms, mood swings, anxiety and depression, mood irritability. Those things can make relationships in our workplaces challenging. We can have less patience because of our emotions. So being aware of that is also important. And just overall, women's general sense of self can be affected as they are, showing up in their workplaces. They're experiencing these symptoms, the fear, the uncertainty, the shame that can be associated or connected with these symptoms can make them lose their self-confidence and their sense of self as they're, going to work or, working in their respective workplaces. So that can make it very difficult for them to speak up in meetings, and also make it challenging for them to volunteer or go after higher positions because of that lack of confidence. So those are some of the common menopause-related or menopausal symptoms that can certainly show up in the workplace.
Wow, 34 symptoms. Thank you for providing such a great explanation for how these symptoms can present considerable challenges for women's everyday lives and in the workplace. And before we jump into what the workplace knows about menopause, Claire, what are you finding women know about menopause prior to going through it?
Sadly, women don't know a whole lot about menopause. There's no real, systemic education about menopause or about this stage of life, the way there is, for example, for both genders around puberty, which we learn about in school. And then if women become pregnant, there are classes and courses and information about pregnancy and birthing and parenting. But whereas not all women will experience, reproduction and motherhood, all women, healthy women, will go through menopause. So it's really surprising that at this stage, we don't have educational programs in place to help support women and have them understand the need for on acknowledging what's happening to us as we go through menopause. I think most people are familiar with hot flashes. You know, those are the things that society has talked about and even joked about for a number of years, or even in our cultural experiences on television way back, even in the 70s, some of characters on sitcoms were having hot flashes. So that part of the menopausal journey has been, talked about a little bit, but everything that Dr. Ballard described as far as what are the number of symptoms and the types of symptoms that we experience, and not all women will experience all of those symptoms. Some women experience very few symptoms or don't even recognize that some of the things that they might have experienced during this journey were related to the menopausal transition. But there is very, very little information provided to women prior to the start of this portion of our lives. And that's something that we are all working to change.
Thank you for that insightful response. With half the population experiencing these symptoms, it is challenging that we don't have that knowledge beforehand before making that transition. Irene, given this lack of awareness about how menopause can affect productivity and career advancement, how do you think employers typically perceive these challenges?
It's in this case, what you don't know will hurt you. The lack of information or understanding means that we can't identify the root cause, and it puts us at a disadvantage in addressing how to handle drops in productivity or this nagging disinterest or hesitation to move forward or to take on a new role at work. And so it's very important that menopause, its impacts are introduced in the workplace, because then it's something that's considered top of mind, the same way that we have kind of taken an approach to mental health. And so we have established a bit more grace when it comes to that being a potential challenge that someone might be facing when there is a life situation or something going on. And I think employers need to be able to understand what's going on with menopause, what the potential impacts are on an individual's health, on an individual's life transition, and in recognizing that full scope of that impact and what it can also happen, how it can affect their company or how it can affect their organization. And so we do need to make sure that we are keeping that kind of top of mind, and we're increasing the conversation and that awareness. So that's the only way I think we can really address these challenges as we continue to talk about it, and talk about it from a value retention standpoint as opposed to a liability standpoint. It will help to shift that narrative and address some of that stigma and address the challenges.
Thank you for highlighting how that lack of knowledge impact can have a significant impact on in the workplace. So now I'd like to take a closer look at how what these impacts really look like. According to our survey findings, many women report a variety of challenges that affect their work performance and career progression. For example, over 80% of respondents indicated a loss of self-confidence. Nearly 60% experienced presenteeism and absenteeism. Additionally, more than half reported opting for less demanding roles or scaling back their career ambitions. And other common responses included not pursuing leadership opportunities and reducing work hours. And then for the write-ins, we saw a lot of brain fog, lack of sleep, exhaustion, embarrassment, or feeling the need to hide your symptoms from others, also hot flashes and fatigue. These survey findings really highlight how much menopause and its associated challenges can influence women's experiences in the workplace. Women in midlife are skilled and experienced professionals, yet because of this biological stage they're navigating, many are stepping back from leadership roles. And so Claire, I'd like to ask you, what negative repercussions could this be causing, not only for these women, but also for the future of organizational leadership?
Yeah, well, as you said, at this stage of life, so many women are highly skilled, incredibly efficient, and very productive in the workplace. And so to have them not performing at their best will surely have an impact on the workplace and on the companies and the jobs that they're trying to do. So I think one of the things we have to think about is what are we able to do within a work environment to make these women aware of some of these things that are happening to them, and then help address the problems as best we can for those who are actually experiencing that. And obviously we'll be talking through a lot of that. But if we're talking about, again, women who are at this, in many cases, a senior point in their career as they're going through these symptoms, the impact is beyond just, maybe not performing at the top of their, game in many instances. But I think the statistic is up to about 30% of women actually leave the workforce because of menopausal symptoms and the symptoms they're experiencing. And that has a huge impact on the workplace. So think about retraining that needs to be done, the hiring cost of replacing these highly skilled, highly efficient, highly productive women. All of those things need to be taken into consideration. And when you balance that with having some basic understanding and some basic tools in place to help women travel through this journey, it makes much more sense to be able to address menopausal women symptoms and give them the support they need than to have to replace them in the workplace.
Thank you for highlighting all those downstream consequences, and 30% leaving the workforce is such a significant amount. Irene, what are your thoughts on these results? Like, in addition to not seeking leadership roles, how might midlife health concerns affect employees' overall engagement with their work, colleagues, and organizations?
Well, midlife is a transition point, right? In the same way, there's changes that are going on in your body, but I think about puberty that we mentioned earlier. Even just entering that new phase, teens, adolescents, there are physical changes, there's mental changes, there's emotional changes, and they approach society very differently as they enter puberty. We do the same thing around pregnancy for men and for women, right? As you're going into pregnancy, into parenthood, you start to make these changes, you start to take inventory and stock of your life, of your work, of your situations, of all of that. And the same thing happens in midlife. Men do it, right? We talk about that. They're getting the sporty car, they're changing. And so likewise for women, we have to begin to normalize that as well, because women during midlife, it's a transition that prompts them taking inventory of their work, of, does this really make me happy? Do I need to go and become an entrepreneur? Should I just go ahead and retire? What are these challenges? Dr. Ballard said earlier about even self-confidence, because of some of these challenges that women face, it can affect, I can't trust myself. I might not be able to trust if I'm getting in front of to speak, and I have these hot flashes, and then I might feel embarrassed or have this brain fog, and I'm giving a talk, and now I can't even remember this particular word. I don't want to be caught off guard, and so how can we support them better? It's not, Claire said it very well. They're still smart. They still have this expertise. There's not an intellectual decline. That's not brain fog, right? It's not, they have all that experience, and so we just need to provide that support to address these particular barriers. But other than, yes, there's the absenteeism, the presenteeism. Those are the things that happens. But essentially, I think workplaces for retention in general should really look at how can we make our work environment a place that, even if challenges happen to our employees during their life, during their health span, that they would still want to come to work. They still will value and be aligned to the mission of this organization or this company. And so what can we do to ensure that we are creating an environment that while they are going through this change, they still value being in this environment and committing to the mission of our organization.
I really like the way you highlighted that it's not decline, it's brain fog, and it's so important to take inventory and, as you said, provide an environment that allows employees to want to come to work and continue to support employees. Joelle, I'd like to talk about how this plays out in terms of getting treatment. When the women you're working with are seeking treatment for their menopause symptoms, is interference with their workplace performance or well-being a driving factor in their decision to seek help?
So when seeing patients in the office, they the common thread is not, oh, I want to fix these symptoms or get rid of these symptoms so I can, do something in my workplace. I think it's more of, I don't feel like myself anymore. I don't feel like I can do just things in general, whether it's at home or at work. So when we talk about, just the workplace or, symptoms in general and how we can treat the symptoms to help us in the workplace, it's not it doesn't work in a vacuum, right? Like there's so many things that are affecting them. And there's so many parts and layers to us as women, right? So I didn't see women coming in and say, I'm having these symptoms and I want to get treatment so I can, do better at work. It was more so, I want to just show up better in life, right? Like just in general. Life is hard because these symptoms are kicking my butt and I want to know how I can fix it. Now, when I transitioned into coaching women, I will say that a lot of those women would come to me asking for help with the symptoms too. I can show up to build a business outside of their workplace. They're also having other, desires to start a business and do things other than their, 9 to 5. And they came to me because they felt like their symptoms were preventing them from doing that. And that also had to do with confidence, trusting themselves. So all of that kind of plays a factor.
Thank you for that insight and really highlighting how broadly the menopause symptoms can impact women's lives. Moving to the next slide, I'd like to take a closer look at how these workplace decisions play out for women and men in midlife. Our survey results revealed that over 80 respondents agreed or strongly agreed that midlife health issues and needs affect career progression differently for men and women in the workplace. This highlights the gender-specific impact of midlife health concerns and raises questions about how organizations can better address these disparities. So Claire, I'd like to ask you, how do societal and workplace expectations around productivity and leadership impact the way men and women navigate health issues in midlife?
Well, I think overall, I mean, we look at the number of CEOs, there's probably, I think the statistic something like 17 to 1, male CEOs versus female CEOs. And then the expectations, as you said, are very different for the men and women within the CEO position. First of all, female CEOs tend to get fired more than male CEOs. That's a statistic, and women know that statistic. So again, are you going to talk about the issues that you're having personally when that is a statistic that is a reality within our workplaces? Probably not. And I think as obviously just culturally and aging, the way that we present and view women aging is vastly different than how we view men aging. And that's obviously going to translate within the workplace as well. So I actually just saw a clip. I don't know if you guys saw this, but they were talking about Erin Andrews, a sportscaster, who covers the NFL games right now. And there were comments about her appearance and the fact that at 46, she was showing wrinkles and she'd probably step down, right? That would never happen. And you were talking about a leading male sportscaster. So those, again, are just examples of the way that we kind of treat men and women within the workplace. So we have to be cognizant of the fact that women are going through different physical things at this time than their male counterparts. But men also go through dynamic changes at midlife, as we've discussed. There's changes in their home life, et cetera. And the chances are that a male CEO potentially has a partner or spouse at home who is going through menopause. And so we have to talk about the fact that while women go through this journey, we don't go through it alone because it does impact our relationships. And so the more we know about it, the more we talk about it, and the more we address some of these issues that women are having, it's going to be really better for the the entire community that we operate in. And so I think there's a great opportunity to help both the individual woman as well as employees and managers and spouses understand a little bit more about this common biological pathway for women and what those implications are. And by making small adjustments, we can really make an improvement within the workplace to help women in leadership positions address these needs without being embarrassed about it, without having to hide it, without having to leave the workforce because they're experiencing these things. And so I think there's really, like I said, great opportunity to make some small changes that can have huge impact and positive results on our workplaces.
Thank you for outlining all those different expectations, and another great example. And I feel like a story we hear over and over again. For women, there's this added layer of pressure to continue performing at the same level, despite these different health challenges and expectations. So now I'd like to take a closer look at how these differences in health needs play out. Our survey found that 93.3% of respondents agree or strongly agree that women in midlife have different healthcare coverage needs compared to women aged 18 to 39. Similarly, 81% agree that men in midlife have different healthcare coverage needs compared to men aged 18 to 39. And most strikingly, 87.4% agree or strongly agree that women in midlife have different healthcare coverage needs compared to men in midlife. Dr. Joelle, what impact might insufficient or inadequate healthcare coverage for individuals in midlife have on their ability to remain engaged or productive in the workplace?
So when you think about our health and our wellness, if you're unhealthy, if you're unwell, it makes it very difficult for us to stay engaged, to stay productive in our workplace, or just, life in general. So when we talk about inadequate health coverage, that leads to women experiencing these symptoms, whether it's brain fog, hot flashes, sleep disturbances, and not getting not seeking or not able to seek medical care in order to address these symptoms. And the longer they're not addressing them, their symptoms are worsening. Life, as we all know, life be lifing. And those things essentially can lead to other chronic health conditions, diabetes, high blood pressure, and things like that. So when when women don't have adequate health care that sets them up for chronic medical conditions that leads to more financial implications when it comes to treating these chronic medical conditions, and then not able to show up at work because of them, losing money that way, and again, just not feeling well enough to actually engage in work and be motivated to show up in the workplace like they used to. So it's very important for them to have the adequate health coverage so that they can actually address these symptoms, as well as address medical conditions or prevent medical conditions, so that they can continue to engage and be motivated and do all the things that they want to do in the workplace and outside of their workplace.
Thank you. That mentioned a great point on how inadequate healthcare coverage can, prevent medical conditions. When we're talking about midlife health, what role does preventative healthcare coverage play, and how does managing midlife symptoms, specifically for conditions like menopause, influence women's long-term health?
Very critical. Preventive healthcare is very critical when we're talking about midlife women's health. And when when people think about menopause, they're like, oh, it's just hot flashes, right? Like, so much more than that. Claire mentioned that before, so much more than hot flashes. And when we're getting into our 40s and 50s, and we're reaching menopause into postmenopause, we are at an increased risk of developing other conditions like high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, diabetes. So the more we are proactive when we're approaching these approaching this transition, the better we'll be, health-wise and wellness. So prevention in regards to getting our regular screenings, having our well woman exams annually, having our annual physical exams, and we're also checking our high blood pressure and cholesterol levels. Staying on top of those can, eventually help with possibly or hopefully preventing cardiovascular disease. So getting the screenings like our mammograms for our breast health. And then also having the conversations with our doctors, prevention-wise, in regards to our exercise, our nutrition, all of these lifestyle modifications. We talk about when we talk about menopause, a lot of it discusses, the treatments, the hormonal treatments, the non-hormonal treatments. I also like to amplify the idea that lifestyle modification is really the baseline where women need to start when we're talking about addressing these symptoms. And those lifestyle modification includes, being mindful of what we're eating, our nutrition, exercising, moving our bodies, as well as our stress management. Like I said before, menopause in general does not operate in a vacuum. There's so many things outside of us that are happening that impacts the intensity of our menopausal symptoms. So managing our stress is also very important, is also very preventive when we're talking about, menopause and midlife health and preventing diseases, down the line. So that's also important. So those lifestyle modifications is also very important, as well as mental health. Mental health is, many women are taken aback when they experience anxiety and depression when they're entering this transition. So having mental health services available is also very important, as far as prevention, when we're talking about navigating the changes that are happening, within our bodies mentally and emotionally.
Thank you for such a thoughtful response and really highlighting how important preventative care is. We're finding that there's still a gap in support for women experiencing menopause. And so I'd like to turn the discussion to if and how organizations are working to address this gap. According to our survey, only 41% of respondents agree or strongly agree that their organization plays an active role in creating and maintaining a healthy work environment for all employees, including those experiencing perimenopause or menopause. Dr. Irene, if approximately half of the world's population will go through menopause, which includes a substantial portion of the workforce, why is it important for employees to recognize their role in this space and the ability they have to help address menopause stigma?
I even want to kind of double back, like over 6,000 women enter menopause daily, right? And, in that age, as you mentioned earlier, the average age of menopause is 51. Women can go through the menopause transition for 4 to 7 years on average, and sometimes longer. So within that age range of about 45 to 54, 75% of women are actively working. They're participating in the workforce. This is not a small number. This is not a minority. This is not, but I don't know if workplaces really understand how much of their workforce, their employees, are being affected by menopause. And so I think part of it is recognizing that and in understanding that this is a significant group of a population that these women have also, if they're 45, 50, 55 years old, have spent at least on 20 years working. They're carrying institutional memory. They're carrying training. They have elevated in certain areas of their career. They have experience behind their belt, even if they're not the senior team member and they don't manage staff, they still have been around. They have been working for a significant portion of their life and have that experience to contribute to the rest of their workforce, to their colleagues, to those that they manage, or even those that when you manage up. And so there is a role for employers because it's not just a responsibility, but it's an opportunity to make sure that they have a healthy workforce. I mean, nobody wants turnover, and it's not something that we should allow to happen haphazardly, because these challenges you see here, you know, 41% saying that their organization plays a role. There's so many opportunities. And we often will take a job because we're excited, we're interested in the work, we're mission aligned, or we like how it pays, whatever your reason is, you often chose to be there. You selected to be in this particular work environment. You want to be able to stay. The environment is often what makes us leave, not the work itself. And so as long as if we continue to create that environment that makes somebody want to stay, that makes them connected to their colleagues, to the work, that reduces barriers and challenges, we would do it. The same way if I worked and you know, if I had travel, you know, costs or something associated with my work, and I was moving around the city, if my job did not facilitate reimbursement, I would have to think twice about that, right? I mean, this burden that I'm taking on. So they recognize that. And so if they recognize, oh, there's no parking in the city, well, let's get them zip card, do this. There's so many other ways that we consider accommodations for our work. This is just one of those things we need to consider accommodations. And I think when we reduce the barrier of thinking that it's too much, it's too expensive, it's, you know, it's not our problem. I had a colleague who said so poignantly that it's important to help leaders in the workplace understand the cost of doing nothing. And so when you don't do anything, we're going to have this really nasty cycle of women feeling vulnerable, women feeling unsupported as they go through this life change. And like we said earlier, this is something that by a certain age, every woman will have experienced. And for many, they will be actively working, and they're not at the end of their work cycle. They're in the middle of it. They're in the middle of their life cycle, but they're also in the middle of their work cycle. And so we want to be able to retain them. The role of employers is critical in infrastructure, in practices, in formal policies that are in place, and then also creating that intangible environment and culture that honors individuals from the newest employee or the youngest employee to the oldest employee, and making sure that we're allowing them to be optimal in their performance at every stage.
Thank you for breaking down those numbers in the beginning. I think it really helped paint a picture for how substantial the role employers have in making these decisions. So diving further into this, Claire, how critical is it for companies to provide comprehensive healthcare coverage that addresses menopause and other midlife health challenges? And from your perspective, why do you think many employers are still unwilling to cover treatments related to these health concerns?
I think we don't talk a lot about, the importance of it and why it matters too. But I also want to take a minute to say that I'm not so sure that employers are reluctant to do it. I think it's really about the awareness, and that we haven't had until this stage discussions within our society and certainly within our workforce about menopause. And so, it's particularly for the audience that we're speaking to here. I know that, a lot of HR managers are very interested in providing the best for their employees. And I think it was that it just wasn't talked about. It wasn't in the standard manual, on things that we need to do. And we've made some significant progress, in the workplace over the last, decades. If you think about the policies that were put in place for maternal health, for example, right? We know that they help to boost retention, they improve morale, they help with productivity, and they help attract top talent. And so I think it's the same can be expected when we have policies that specifically call out that many of the benefits that are already in place at your companies and institutions or organizations just need to be called out as menopause specific, that you can use these for handling whatever symptoms you're having for menopause. If that's acceptable within a corporate environment, then women will hopefully take advantage of it. It just hasn't been called out yet. And so I'm hopeful that surveys like this and these types of webinars will help to raise awareness within our corporate cultures that this is something that can and should be done for all of the reasons we've talked about so far. But the opportunity, as we said, is there to make some changes that can be very small when it comes to the impact on the bottom line for a company, but will have a huge impact in improving productivity, in improving retention, in improving morale for workers who are going through this stage of life. Not only that, but it also sets an example for younger employees on how the company values its employees as they age. How do they value their wisdom, their productivity, their years longevity within the company? You know, it's making a great statement then for some of these younger workers to say, oh, I really want to stay with this company because they're looking out for me in the long term. So there's some immediate benefit, obviously, for the women who are currently in those leadership positions. But again, I think it sets a great example moving forward. And I think the other reason to address some of these symptoms is within these accommodations is also particularly on what's covered under healthcare policies and looking at your policies to ensure that those that you provide to your employees address some of the needs of women at midlife. That's going to be a critical piece to it. And as we said, healthy employees, besides bringing great things to the workplace, that will also help reduce, obviously, the expense on your health insurance, right? If women are being treated and not having to go through the comorbid things that happen when these symptoms aren't addressed early and get taken care of, and women have, again, excellent opportunities for treatment for many of these menopausal symptoms. And if they just had access to it, knew it was aware, and it was covered, well, then any kind of longer term health issues that these women have, you're also preventing, in many cases, osteoporosis, cardiovascular disease, cancer. So there's really great benefit to addressing these symptoms during menopause. And again, I think it's been more just lack of awareness. And I hope we will have more companies stepping up and saying, oh, we recognize this now, and we're going to include and call out menopause as one of the reasons that women can take advantage of the benefits we already have.
Thank you for that insight and highlighting how it's more about taking the opportunity to raise awareness within corporate cultures to make changes that will have major benefits for women. So now I'd like to take a closer look at the types of accommodations that are currently being provided. Our survey found that nearly 90% of respondents reported that their employers provide time off for medical appointments and consistent access to restrooms. Similarly, about 90% offer employee assistance programs. Around 65% provide flexible work hours and break times. Just over half of respondents noted access to remote work options and amenities like cold water, cooling devices such as fans. However, fewer than half of employers are creating more comfortable workspaces, such as adjustable temperatures or dedicated rest spaces. And less than a quarter of workplaces offer individualized support like coaching or therapy sessions. Dr. Irene, how do these accommodations help employees dealing with midlife health challenges maintain productivity and career progression?
They are reducing the barrier. I mean, essentially, it's as we mentioned earlier, it's not that their capability has shifted. It's their or their capacity. It's these external things that are happening, or rather internal to their body, but it's not them. They had productivity, right? Before this transition, they were functioning at a certain level, they were producing at a certain level. And so there's a challenge that can be adjusted for. And so accommodations are important because they help to support some of the medical and lifestyle approaches that are there. It all works together. I think about, with these accommodations, almost nothing here is unique or rather exclusive to menopause, right? And so a lot of times you might say menopause-friendly accommodations, kind of what Claire was talking about, that there are accommodations that you probably already have set in place, or options or opportunities in the workforce, but it's just recognizing this is the one that I might need to tap into because here are my challenges. And so being open to that, the accommodations are very helpful because, it allows us to be creative, to address the need. And it's important to know that sometimes these are, you know, low hanging fruit, some of them. Some are one time. So for example, if hot flashes are really your challenge and you need a fan, you're not going to buy a fan for this employee every week, every month, every year. You're buying it once. It's going to last for years. When that employee's gone, that fan might even be able to put in storage and use for somebody else later. So I think even just I think sometimes when you think of accommodation, even as an employee, you might think it's going to be too much. I can't ask about it. And, you know, or as a supervisor, oh, we don't know how much it's going to cost and there's going to be a tag to it. But not everything is expensive. Some things just need to be repurposed and shifted around. But I would say the accommodations, this is a, you know, this is a great common list that people have identified. But one of the things I just want to, you know, spark folks to think about is when you're in a non-traditional office environment, what accommodation can you offer? Because I think a lot of times you're thinking in my desk, I can do the temperature control. Well, if I work in a manufacturing plant and there's all these machines going on and I'm standing on the line, you can't necessarily turn up or down the temperature very easily, you know, so it might be uniforms and having uniforms that are layered so I can remove a couple layers but still stay safe, or I can add layers and still be okay, or it's cotton versus polyester so I can breathe a little bit better, you know, that these types of things. And, you know, the breaks, what does it look like for breaks, you know, and staffing, and how if I leave my station, what then happens with my colleagues, because I also don't want to leave my colleagues in the lurch. So I think these are some of those pieces where we want the accommodations are really important, but then also having an environment where someone's comfortable asking for them and that the supervisors are equipped to give them and they know how to implement them for their various employees as needed and making those decisions. And so I think the accommodations, they're completely helpful. I don't think anybody would turn it down if they believed they were going to get it without any ramifications or without any blowback. I don't know any woman who would say, I absolutely don't want it. They would definitely take it. And I think there is some stigma we have to address about asking and receiving accommodations in the workplace.
Thank you for pointing out the need to also ensure accommodations are provided in non-traditional office settings as well. And you also mentioned low-hanging fruit accommodations, which leads me to my next question, which I'd like to ask Claire. Can you share an example of another easy kind of workplace accommodation that are successful in improving women's abilities to manage menopause symptoms and thrive in the workplace?
Yeah, well, first of all, you couldn't see me, but I was like clapping and nodding along to everything that Irene said, because that is exactly right? That many of these accommodations that we have are just not called out specifically for women who are experiencing menopausal symptoms. And the change can be as easy as that in, you know, guidelines in the HR guide saying you can use this for menopausal symptoms. And we do have to be aware that we're not always talking about these, you know, executive women, or these, we refer to them as executive women, but these women who are in the workplace are not always in an executive setting. And so really making sure that we look at that. I think one of the couple of things that we've had presented to us, at least from the National Menopause Foundation, when we're talking to women about what they've experienced or what they would like, the time accommodation, the flexibility of being able to step away, whether that is, as Irene said, stepping away from the manufacturing line, stepping away from a meeting to have a little bit of flexibility if you find that you're starting to experiencing a symptom or you're just not feeling at your best, has been one of the things that women have found to be incredibly helpful. And it really is about, as Irene said, that culture of it being okay, you know, and understanding like, oh, that makes sense. You know, you need a little flexibility. That's fine. And then not being like, oh, God, did you see that she just got up and walked out, you know, of the meeting while so-and-so was talking? So we just have to adjust some of those things. Something that's a little bit newer than what has traditionally been in the workplace that we've also found women really appreciate is access to telehealth services. And so I think, you know, that does take a little bit more time and discussion within a corporate environment or any kind of company environment. But again, when you have such a large number of women who are impacted by this, and taking time to get to a doctor's appointment after we've already taken care of, in many cases, our child's doctor appointments, our spouse's doctor appointments, and our parents' doctor's appointments. It's really one of those last things that women do. And that really is a hurdle to why women don't seek out treatment for some of these symptoms. So having access to a telehealth service where they can communicate with the doctor, get a prescription, do whatever that they need, and not have to actually take time out to commute to an appointment has also been, pointed out as a really great advancement that just wasn't available previously, but it is now. So I think that's an important one to consider moving forward.
Thank you for that example and really breaking down how beneficial it can be as for such a simple fix. Both you and Irene had touched on the culture or the hesitation for employees to voice their need for these accommodations. So I'd like to take a look at how pervasive this hesitation is. Our survey found that 75.7% of respondents disagree or strongly disagree that men in midlife feel comfortable discussing coverage for age-related health issues. And similarly, 60.4% of disagree or strongly disagree that women in midlife feel comfortable discussing coverage for age-related health issues. So Claire, looking at these numbers, why do men and women have such hesitation about talking about age-related healthcare needs?
Well, unfortunately, that's just, our society, right? We are a youth-focused society. We have been for a number of years. And it's really interesting because in other countries and in other cultures, the aging is revered, right? And it's we look at the older populations as being so beneficial to the culture that there's not this stigma around aging the way we have it in the United States. So I think the fact that we're actually talking about menopause today and a little bit more in society is a sign that maybe we're progressing a little towards that idea that, oh, right, middle age isn't the end. It is just that, middle. And that there's a lot of good that we all have to do and can do moving forward. And so I think some of those shifts will be beneficial, but it's going to take all of us to really make that something that becomes persistent and consistent. And so I think, and then again, whereas we're talking specifically about menopause and midlife women's health, as you mentioned in this question, men have a difficulty with it too, right? In aging, maybe not to the extent that women do. And I think a lot of times when we talk about the fact that, oh, this impacts men too, we get pushback going, but it's so much worse for women. Yes, that's true. We're not denying that. But men also face a lot of different health challenges, and they don't want to talk about it at work either. And again, we all have that kind of slight fear about how are we going to perceive when people know how old we are. So that is something that certainly the workplace can be a huge driver in changing culturally for us in the United States. And so I'm really, optimistic about how just addressing midlife women's health and men's midlife health within the workplace will have a positive impact across all of us when we talk about what is healthy aging and what does that mean. And we're all living longer. So when we talked about the statistics, women will spend a third of our lives postmenopausal. That's a long time. So we might as well talk about it and address it and then look forward to it versus being something that we needed to hide or be ashamed of.
You make a great point about how so much of this stems from how, different cultures view aging, but the workplace has a role in changing this perception. So Dr. Irene, what do you believe is the first critical step in breaking this silence and normalizing these conversations about midlife health and menopause in the workplace, especially for women in male-dominated industries?
I think it's important to offer safety to talk about it, but to respect privacy. At the end of the day, when we're engaging with our colleagues, we want to consider how our words and our actions might convey support rather than stigma or shame. And I would almost boil it down to what can we do to promote or retain dignity for our colleagues? So as Claire mentioned, if someone steps away to a meeting, does that now become a side conversation that you and another colleague, what do they get that we don't get? How come they're allowed to? Or if they stepped out from a meeting, maybe it was for a really good reason. And we should offer some grace there, you know. And I think another piece is everyone knows someone that's going through menopause. Everyone knows somebody, many people. Talk to them because I think, you know, learn about their experience. It's easier to empathize when something is close to home. So the people in your life, if you start to, whether you're an HR professional, you're executive, you're a colleague, talk to the women in your life, learn about their menopause experience. It hits closer to home. And somebody will be willing to share in your family, friend circuit, social circuit. And that will begin for us to be able to develop empathy. Because I think when you don't know it, it's still a very foreign thing and a concept because we haven't talked about it for forever. No one's really talking about it. And the more that you hear about it, the more that you talk about it, the more that you see the experiences of your loved ones, the more you develop more empathy around the topic and you bring that into your workplace and how you engage with your coworkers.
Thank you for the thoughtful response and breaking down the stigma around aging health issues, which turns us to our next survey finding. We found that fewer than half of respondents agreed or strongly agreed that their organization actively works to reduce stigma for all employees, including those experiencing perimenopause or menopause. Really highlights how much work still needs to be done in terms of fostering an environment that supports these open conversations. And so, Dr. Irene, I'd also like to ask you how HR departments can play a role in creating a work environment where employees feel comfortable discussing their midlife health challenges and requesting accommodations without that fear or stigma.
I would say the ideas, a lot of things are, the infrastructure is there. I think getting creative and repurposing things. There's employee resource groups, there's trainings. But one of the things I would definitely like to highlight is maybe while you create designated spaces for women that's set apart, also seeing where you can create community spaces for everyone. So it's not just the menopausal women learning how to deal with menopause, but menopause being incorporated. So you don't have a separate training on menopause, but when you train your managers, you have a session on menopause. So they don't have to go outside of what's in the norm for this to be introduced into their work, right? So they don't always have to go to it. You can bring it to them.
I think that's such a great point about, not separating it and creating this other area. And Dr. Joelle, I'd like to ask you, how can the way benefits are structured and communicated help alleviate some of the discomfort employees feel when discussing coverage for age-related health issues with their employers? Specifically, what are you telling your patients to check when they are selecting healthcare coverage during open enrollment?
So I have to say that, women feeling comfortable with their employers as far as talking about age-related issues. A lot of women don't feel comfortable talking to their doctors when it comes to health age-related issues and menopause. So I think we first need to definitely increase awareness amongst women themselves so they can feel empowered and educated in regards to this stage of life, normalize that conversation and, communicate where, you have workshops and resources where women can get that education and increase their awareness. And Claire talked about how women are last on the list when it comes to, going to see the doctor in general. Really encouraging women to prioritize themselves when they get into this stage of life so that they can actually, advocate for themselves when they need things in the workplace or they need things when they go see their doctors. So when we're looking at health, health benefits and health coverages, I talk to women in regards to talk to them about checking to see specialist wise, whether they have coverage when they're going to see endocrinologists, orthopedists, in regards to their bone health, coverage of mental health benefits, because mental health is definitely something that impacts a lot of women when it comes to, midlife and menopause, because again, everything else is going on besides menopause. We're taking care of parents, we're taking care of children, we're taking care of a lot of things. And that mental health benefit is definitely crucial when we're trying to navigate the changes that are happening within our bodies. So definitely mental health benefits, and also looking to see if there's other alternatives alternative therapies that are offered or covered under their health coverage, like, supplements or acupuncture, cognitive behavioral therapy, all these things that also can help with them navigating their symptoms, and then, ultimately being able to show up in their households as well as in their workplaces.
Thank you. And I know we're just about running out of time, and this last slide just shows our the initiatives that are being adopted by organizations. If Claire, I could just ask you to briefly touch on what specific workplace initiatives you think are most effective in reducing stigma around menopause and supporting employees experiencing it.
I honestly think I'm just so appreciative to HR.com for actually having this conversation, because I think one of the most effective things is to have our HR professionals be the champions for bringing about a culture that is responsive to the needs of all its employees. And so that's making sure that menopause is part of, and midlife women's health is part of the training that you all receive is one of the critical steps we can do to have a huge impact on workplace and women's experience in the workplace.
Well, thank you all for your valuable participation and for joining us today. And a special thanks to our panelists for sharing their insights and expertise on such an important topic.
I'd like to thank our speakers as well as all of you for joining us today. If you would like to view this webcast again, the archive recording will be available on the HR.com website within 24 hours. The webcast credit will show on your HR.com account within 2 business days, and we'll also send you an email with your credit information. Your feedback is important to us. Please take a moment to fill out the exit survey that opened in a new browser page on your computer. This concludes our webcast. Enjoy the rest of your day.